Hey everybody, it's Jennifer Seger. Welcome back to the channel. I know in my last video post it was like, hey, this is where I've been, and I had big plans to get quite a few things up on the channel before our little guy arrived on the scene, but you know, best laid plans. So introducing here our little Walter Robert Seger. He was born about a week early, so when I put up the last video, I actually had intentions of filming quite a few things, a nursery tour which is filmed and will be up after this video, as well as some Disney content that we're still editing will be coming your way, but just kind of an update on where we are at with life. I had full intention actually on the day that I had got like lighting set up and everything to do some filming. My water broke, so fast forward till now, taken a bit of time. Our little Walter is 5 weeks old right now, so while he's taking a nap and just had a nice long feed, I thought I would take a few minutes and tell you a little bit about Walter's birth story. So if you're new to the channel, hi, my name is Jennifer Seger, and typically on this channel we share our travel adventures as well as home adventures, and now we'll be sharing definitely our baby adventures. So I had, like I said, been all ready to go ahead and get filming on some videos, and my water broke, but I wasn't 100% sure that my water broke, because not to be TMI, but a lot of mamas, you will know this out there, like sometimes you're like, did I pee my pants or was that my water breaking? Because quite honestly, either of those things can happen late in pregnancy, and I had been having a little bit of spotting and cramping in the days leading up to it that my doctor was like, nothing to worry about. Still feel like we were on track for actually what we had was a planned C-section, because Walter was what they call transverse. He wasn't breech, which would be feet down. He was actually laying like his head was on my left side and his butt was on my right side. And we had gotten him to turn a couple different times, but he just kept going back, which indicated he was like a smaller baby. He didn't end up being that small, but it was after 36 weeks that he kept turning, which was a little unusual. So his little head's bobbling here, and he's snoring away. So anyway, I went in to have the ROM or the ROM test at triage at our hospital, which is just luckily very, very close for us. It's just a couple miles away. So went over and had that done, and we were actually trying to get him on the fetal monitor, but they were having a heck of a time, and they were putting the fetal monitor where we thought we knew he was, and it just wasn't working. It wasn't working. And they came back and said, yep, that was my water breaking. I was having, at this point, 0 contractions. And then we're having trouble getting him on the fetal monitor. The doctor came in with the ultrasound machine, and she's like, well, I'm just going to try down here first. It turns out he had dropped and he was in position now for me to have a natural birth. So when I first heard the news that my water broke, I thought, oh great, here we're going with an emergency C-section. But as it turned out, we were on track for a natural birth. He had kind of, the doctor told me, become like a little joke at the clinic. So the clinic that we were seeing had 5 different doctors, and the doctor that I primarily saw, who doesn't do deliveries anymore because she's near retirement age and just a lovely woman, but I knew the other doctors that would do it. When she heard the news, she said, check to be sure what positioning he is in, because that kid is always moving. And he's always on the go. Even now after he's born, he's a wiggly guy, or he likes it better when we are moving, when we're rocking, when we're doing anything like that. So anyway, he was poised and ready for me to have a natural birth. They actually put a belly band on me to keep him from moving as I walked from triage to the labor and delivery room. So that was kind of crazy. At this point, I think I'd gone over to the clinic about like 1:30 or so, and it was not until 4 o'clock that they were saying, okay, yep, your water broke and we are admitting you, because there was a few other things they wanted to check for. And I had been keeping in touch with Nate, kind of calling him. He was working. Of course, he had started his scheduled time off when we were going to have the C-section. And he's like, well, should I come over there now? And I'm like, let's wait to see what's going on. So even at 4, as I was being admitted, nothing was happening. They hadn't yet checked, but when they would check in a few minutes, I was dilated like just over 2 centimeters. So, and I was having no contractions. So legit, nothing was going on. So Nate like came home from work and made arrangements for our dog and all of that before coming over to the hospital. I think he got there probably around, I want to say it was like 5:30, 6 o'clock, somewhere in there. And I think around 7:30 I started having contractions, but at that point, very infrequent, very mild, and pretty much Nate and I just hung out. We watched the Wild game that was on that night, like a playoff game. Nate went and got us dinner, and there were crazy thunderstorms. So it was just kind of a strange night being admitted to the hospital with not a lot going on. But about 4:30 in the morning, I woke up to having some pretty intense contractions, and they were coming really quickly together. Like I want to say it was like every 3 to 4 minutes they were coming. And I was trying to take baths and things to help ease with the pain. Actually, the nurse was suggesting all sorts of different positions. And the one that felt best was the lotus position, I think it's called, where I was sitting, I had the bed like ramrod, like up straight with my legs kind of butterflied open in front of me. And I thought, when she suggested it, I was like, no way is that going to be comfortable. But it was like throughout my time that I labored, like the most comfortable position that I was in. And I was annoyed that they kept making me move to kind of help move things along to not stay in the same position. But I'm like, no, but I'm finally comfortable. Sorry if you hear our dog barking. I think we're getting a delivery of some sorts, something like that. So anyway, my contractions were coming, and by 1 o'clock in the afternoon, they started what's called coupling, meaning they started coming like every 3 minutes and then 1 minute, and then 3 minutes and then 1 minute. And but I was not, my dilation had only gone up to like maybe 3 centimeters. It was not moving at all. So at that point, they were just kind of monitoring things. We started to talk about me getting an epidural, which my birth plan was to have an absolute natural birth. And then that kind of got waylaid when we had to plan for a C-section. And I mean, I just want to say this to everybody out there, because I struggled with this and there was a lot of tears and a little meltdown. You can't get what you want. You're never gonna know how things will go for you. And the one thing that I had talked to my doctors about ahead of time, which I'm so glad I did, was have a plan, but also be open to things changing. And at this point, I had been, well, it was probably like 3:30 in the afternoon when I finally decided to get the epidural. And so it had been 11 hours of contractions that were not letting up. And the nurse had explained to me, because my water broke, I didn't have that amniotic fluid that would normally be cushioning those contractions. She said, so if your water hadn't broken, and they don't know why it did, of course, because I wasn't dilated or anything, I would be at home. She's like, you'd probably be having some mild contractions and they maybe wouldn't even be coming this quickly together. But the contractions were coming. I was getting no relief from it. And they were pretty painful because of not having that amniotic fluid. And so I talked with a couple different nurses, like I said, exactly one meltdown later, because they said you can keep going and doing this naturally, and that is totally up to you, but it's progressing so slowly, you are going to be exhausted by the time the baby gets here. Well, hit pause on that, because we thought now we were prepped for maybe a day or two more of laboring. But it was about 4:30 that I got the epidural. Also, that happened in the afternoon as I was kind of deciding to get that. So I'm very emotional. The contractions are coming hard and fast. They put me on a blood pressure monitor. So at my age and other risk factors, they're very concerned about preeclampsia. I hope I'm pronouncing that right. I've never actually looked up how to pronounce it, but one of the symptoms or signs of that is having high blood pressure. Well, they have you on this blood pressure cuff that was like automatically going off every 10 to 15 minutes. And it was going off sometimes when I'm in the height of contraction, and I had 3 high readings in a row. And the nurse says, like, the standard is when you have a high reading that they put you on magnesium as a precaution to prevent a seizure during childbirth. Obviously a very important thing. But I had kind of pushed back and said, like, reasonably, like, logically thinking here, I know that it was taking my blood pressure when I was you know, the height of emotion and having a contraction, they're going to read high. Well, they're like, it's still standard procedure. The most that will happen on the magnesium is you'll get a little sleepy. And I was like, okay, at this point I'm tired. We'll just do that. And then we did the epidural as well. After I had the epidural and then the magnesium, they put it in as like one, and I don't know the amounts because I didn't write them down and I'm very groggy on the details. But they put in like one large dose and then it's a slow drip that comes in after that. And so the epidural went in, and immediately after the epidural, or not immediately, maybe like a half an hour, 45 minutes or so after that, my blood pressure was dipping. Now it was like 95/53. And so they kept calling down to anesthesiology to like lower the amount of drug that was being administered as part of the epidural to get my blood pressure. And they gave me like the maximum, it's 5 doses of a drug. And again, I don't know the name of the drug to help get my blood pressure up. So with this whole saga of things and events playing out where my blood pressure was high, magnesium, now it's super low, and we're pushing it. They kept giving me this drug to push it up, but they could only administer that 5 times. Finally, they got that regulated and everything. And it was probably about 7:30 in the evening where I had to intervene, and Nate intervened on my behalf because I was not doing well. I was still not dilated. I wasn't feeling the contractions, so that was great. But that magnesium, and I had been hesitant about it, and I shouldn't have agreed to it in the first place because I know that I have always not done well on magnesium. Doctors and people have suggested I take it in the past, and I don't know why I'm so reactive to it. I have had stomach troubles. I've not felt like myself when I've tried to take several different kinds of magnesium, and people are like, oh, it's not the magnesium, it doesn't affect you. It does. For some reason it affects me. And at this point, I was feeling like I was having an out-of-body experience. I said to Nate, we need to do something because I feel like I'm hovering above me watching all of this happen. Like I felt so drugged and so completely out of it. At first I thought it was the epidural, but then, you know, we were reading about it online and talking to nurse, and epidural wouldn't do that. And they had told me I'd be groggy from the magnesium, but this was ridiculous, like next level. And I started to get like headaches. So I talked to my doctor and wanted to go off the magnesium, and she pushed back quite a bit saying, you know, it was the risk, or the benefit outweighed the risk, and I should really stay on that, magnesium drip. And I said, I want to remember giving birth. I don't want to be drugged out for this. And I remember she was kind of like, well, it's not going to affect your memory. And I was like, that's not what I mean. I'm just like, I'm not myself right now, and I would really like to be myself for the birth of my son. What we agreed to was a little bit of a compromise wherein she had, she had a tech come up and do a blood draw to check if the level was too high on the magnesium, and if the level came back as like a toxic level, she would agree to take me off it. Well, sure enough, the lab result came back. It was a very, very high, bordering toxic level of magnesium in my system. So they took that out. Then they came back and said, oh, the labs might have been off because I had actually had trouble getting my IV in. I don't have a good vein anywhere but in my right, like, I can't point because I'm holding a baby, inner arm. And if you're doing that, like, you can't move your arm. And I'm like, I'm not going to be in labor and not be able to move my arm. So they found a teeny tiny vein in my hand, and they called a specialist up, and he wasn't sure he could get it. He said the size of the vein was about the exact same size of the needle. And I said, can you please try? Because I don't want to not be able to bend my arm. Well, I mean, that just seemed impractical. I wanted to be taking baths and whatnot, which, by the way, I forgot to mention, I did take baths throughout pregnancy, and I have, I think I took a picture of you even, so I'll insert it here, like, major envy of the bathtubs at the Woodwinds Birthing Center. Oh, if I could bring that tub home with me. It was so magical. Anyway, they had the IV in this hand, and then the vein that they pulled the blood draw for the magnesium was up in the same arm. So they thought that maybe the level came back high because, or toxic level, because, you know, the magnesium was being administered in the arm they were drawing from. well, so they took it again and it came back. It wasn't toxic, but it was still very, very high. But at this point they're like, well, your blood pressure's really low now after the epidural. I hadn't had another high reading. So they agreed not to put me back on magnesium. I'm like, yes, thank you. So that was like an entire saga. And it was just frustrating because during the hours, like from getting that magnesium, and I'll say it didn't really kick in until like about the same time as the epidural. I don't really remember like 4 p.m. to like 8:30 p.m. I was so drugged and out of it. It was ridiculous. I finally started to come back and feel like myself to 8 or 9. The epidural was holding off, you know, the feeling of, I wasn't feeling any contractions and was able to get some rest, which was really, really nice. Also in the evening, the doctor did check. They don't want to check how much you're dilated typically after the water breaks because there's a higher risk of infection. So they were kind of leaving me alone until my contractions indicated that my dilation was coming up. But the contractions were still coming really close. So I guess I'm not sure on the medical reasons of it. So they checked around 7:30 and it was questionable whether I was at 4.5, maybe 5 centimeters. And they decided that it was close enough to start administering Pitocin. They also found out that Walter had, basically they call it meconium. I hope I'm pronouncing that right. It's where they basically, Walter pooped in the womb. So that meant that whenever I did give birth, we would have a specialist from the NICU come down to be there to make sure that he hadn't aspirated anything. But when the doctor had checked, she thought she got it all. So anyway, TMI, but I did not know that that was a thing. So I found that really interesting. But once they started the Pitocin, I was still in the epidural, kind of had just a relaxing evening. I was able to get some sleep and really low doses of the epidural. About 12:30, I started to feel the pain break through the epidural, so the contractions. And I won't say it was pain because I'm sure had I not had the epidural, and for those mamas that had done natural labor, which of course I don't know what that feels like, but it was intense pressure and I was surprised at how much pain I was feeling through the epidural. Like, not that I thought it would be pain-free, but it was intense enough that I can't imagine what it was like without the epidural. So they put the blood pressure cuff monitor back on me and I was able to give myself a little more dose to kind of lessen the pain and pressure that I was feeling through the epidural. And it was about, you know, 2:30 in the morning and they expected me to keep laboring, and the nurse actually did not want to check to see how far I was dilated because maybe that was like a 1:30 in the morning, and I finally talked her into checking around 2:30. She's like, I'm sure you're not there yet because you were only at 5 at 7 p.m. and it would be really astonishing if you'd progressed, you know, more than a centimeter or 2 given how things are going. And she finally checked and I was fully dilated. So they called the doctor who said I could start practice pushing, and then they made me stop practice pushing because apparently I didn't need any practice and things were moving quickly. So I was actually told to stop pushing and we had to wait for the doctor to get there. And I think she was there maybe 5 minutes before Walter was born. Like, it went crazy, crazy quickly. And Nate likes to say that he's like, it went really fast. I don't know if I feel like it went really fast, but the whole thing, but I know what he means, like from the time that I was, you know, practice pushing until Walter was here, it was an hour. So things went really smoothly, and he was born at 7 pounds, 2 ounces, and 20 inches long. And I always get that a little mixed up because they had us take guesses, and I guess 7 pounds, 1 ounce and 19 inches long. So I was like so close. But he was just absolutely perfect. The funniest thing that I remember about that is I said to Nate, like earlier before things started, like, when he's born, they're going to put him up on my chest and I'd like you to take a picture of that so we have that memory. So we have the picture. I don't know if I want to really share it because it's a terrible picture. Whoever set him up on my chest did not set him like on my chest where I could see him. They set him like up here. He was actually nuzzling my neck, so I could not see him at all. So I am just trying to look down, and it's a ridiculous picture, and it's kind of funny to look back on. It was just in a blur, all happening so fast, and obviously just very emotional. But that is our birth story. I always enjoy, you know, hearing about what other people go through. So I hope you enjoyed hearing ours and the story of Walter Seger joining our family in the weeks that we've been home. I'm grateful that Nate was able to take just a week off of work to spend with me. Unfortunately, he did not have the paternity leave time, so it was very short, but I of course have a little bit longer. You know, we've been adjusting to our new lives. Ruby has been adjusting to not being our only child, so to speak, but our hearts are very full, and once again I'm saying, you know, after taking a little break here, I hope to get back to filming more and getting videos up on the channel. Obviously took a little break here to adjust to Walter being in our lives, but he's here now and we'll be sharing more on our channel. Want to say thanks so much for watching and letting me share the story of Walter's birth. I'm just over the moon to have him here, to be able to share that with you and to be able to record this just too for my memory. You know, I have notes on how things had happened, and it was important to me to remember because it all gets fuzzy, and I'm trying to remember just even the littlest things that have happened since we've been home. And time is just gonna fly. Somebody said to me that the days are long but the years are short, and I can totally see that playing out because yeah, you're exhausted at the end of the day, but we are so very grateful for Walter to be here and in our lives. I wanted to, before I sign off, talk a little bit about the name, because I didn't touch on that. I guess in my other videos we didn't share what his name was going to be, and honestly we were on the fence right up until probably like the day after he was born, or the day of anyway. That night we were going back and forth between a couple different names, trying to decide what we liked. I had always liked the name Oliver. That was a name that I had actually read in a book that I loved in junior high. There was a character named Oliver, and I had really liked that for a boy's name. Over the years it has gotten very popular, and not that I'm against popular names, because obviously I'm a Jennifer, and the year where Jennifer was the most popular name. So I have always known a lot of other Jennifers in my life, and I don't think that's necessarily been a bad thing. But we did want something, we wanted to find a name that was both a common kind of traditional name, which we both gravitate towards, but something that was a little more unique or less common. So how do you find that name that's like known and common but not common? And we'd gone through so many different names. I make fun of Nate because he vetoed almost everything, and I expected me to be a little less open to names, but Nate was definitely the pickier of the two of us with names, and that's probably because he knows many more people than I know, and sometimes you don't want to, you know, name associate, and I totally get that. So Oliver was definitely on the table. We were searching for other names. It was around Thanksgiving. I start listening to Christmas movies, and I was listening to Elf, and the dad's name was Walter Hobbs. So anytime you hear, I feel like you're pregnant, and especially if you know you're having a boy or a girl, any boy or girl name, you're gonna like try it on for size. And I just thought, oh, Walter, that's interesting. So I came home and asked Nate. I expected a veto, and he's like, oh, I really like Walter. So then we were keeping it under our hat, but around that time we were thinking Walter or Oliver. Well, we went to Disney World on a trip that we had planned to go to the Christmas party and everything in December, and we decided to do our announcement, our gender reveal announcement in Disney World. And the PhotoPass photographer that was taking the picture that we took with, and I'll insert a picture of it here, that it's a boy button that we had made. He was like, do you have any names picked out? And we were like, yeah, it's between Walter or Oliver. And he goes, oh, Walter, like Walt Disney. And truth, we had never made that association, because I don't think I've ever thought of Walt Disney as Walter Disney, nor had we really thought of Walt as a nickname, which we really liked. My reservation about the name Walter, and the only reservation that I had, is that people would call him Wally, and I hate that. But I thought, if we police it young, because my mom policed, so nobody ever called me Jenny. She did not like that as a personal preference. So, you know, we could, not police, but, you know, kind of steer people towards the nickname that we liked. And Walter can, of course, pick what he wants to be called. But we do like the nickname Walt, but crazy, we never made the Disney Association, and a lot of people made that kind of automatically. The most common responses we got when we shared his name was asking if it was a family name, because I think people find it a little unusual. And then also people asking if he was named after Walt Disney, which I don't know he was named after, but that's you know, some pretty big shoes to fill. So it's kind of a cool connection there, legacy. So that's a little bit about the name that we had picked out, and Robert was always going to be his middle name, because Nate is the third Robert for a middle name in his family, third or fourth, and then Walter following that succession. So yeah, so that is our birth story, and the story behind Walter's name. So again, thank you everyone so much for watching. I know this video is getting a little long. Call it that. I don't get to talk to many adults during the day these days. I'm rambling a little bit. So thanks for hanging in here with me. If you do like the video, make sure to click that thumbs up button below. It really helps me trying to grow the channel here, and make sure to subscribe if you are new. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you next time.